Well, welcome back to our 5-part series on writing a vision and capturing a vision statement and even a mission statement. I'm John Schulte. I'm a pastor and I've been a church consultant and studying the church for 30 years. And I'm just simply sharing some of the things I've learned. And if it's helpful to you, great. And if it's not, that's okay. You can move on. But hopefully it will give you some things that might be helpful in discovering the vision that God has for you, and even writing it down as a church. If you're in a committee that has to write, a vision or mission statement, you'll be able to do that by watching this series of videos. And this is the second video in the series. There's the first one. We invite you to watch that, an introductory over the whole thing. And in this one, we're going to be talking about creating a self-study, which is a pretty important piece to the project. And joining me here is Dr. Deborah Kelly, and a good friend of mine and someone that I've worked with before on a lot of different projects. So Deborah, why don't you introduce yourself?
I have changed careers, different ways through life. I have been a bank branch manager, a software engineer, and then I went for my doctorate in strategic management, and then I was an economics professor. And one thing that I told John years ago when we met was the fact that I almost didn't go into strategic management because I was quite concerned about the fact that I would be consulting with companies, or a church, and trying to give them ideas about how to move forward. And as soon as I walked out the door and they were finished with me, they'd take that book and put it on the shelf and say, yeah, whatever. And they'd go on with their daily lives. And it's like, no, I want to benefit you. I want to help you so that you can move forward and do different things. And yet I continued with my studies, and so glad that I did, because it's turned out really well.
Oh, yeah. Now, it's interesting. I'm a professor of religion and humanities, and you're an economics professor. We got together to look at the church.
That's right. That's right.
So it's a great combination and a lot of fun. We don't want that to just gather dust on the shelf. I like what you said about that. So many churches are writing these statements and then they just go somewhere and, that's the end of that.
It's the same vision and mission that it's been since day one when they started, 40 years ago. So
right. Yeah, right. So this is also a good checkup too. This may help you in seeing where are we? Is this still our vision and mission? Is this still the direction we're going, or should we do something else? So that'll be helpful. But this is a really important part of the whole process, and I want to stress that. Don't skimp here.
Yes.
And this takes a while. Gathering the information that you're going to want to gather takes a while. And the passage of Scripture that always comes to mind for me when I'm helping churches at this stage, is back in Joshua chapter 2, where they're just about to take the promised land. And Joshua, sends these spies in, and they check it all out, and they can come back and they give him a report. And that's really, I think, what a self-study is. It's getting into the mission field that your church is going to be in, or is in, and checking it out, and finding out, what is it all about? That's the key. What are we facing? What are the things, what is this community that we're in?
Actually, I have a quote from a book that I read recently by Adam Grant, and he says, recognizing our shortcomings opens the door to doubt. That search leads us to new discoveries. And that's what I think this study really does, is kind of gets us to stop, look at who we are, where we're going,
good point,
and how can we move forward in new ways. And that's, God is also trying to say to us sometimes, hey, maybe not do that anymore. Look what you could do.
Yeah.
And that is pretty exciting.
In the first video, we were talking about bathing this in prayer, really following in prayer, and the Holy Spirit can lead you to the things you need to do, and to reveal to you how you can live into God's greater mission, the commission, the Great Commission. But I agree too here in this stage, that the prayer sometimes has to be, Lord, get me out of the way. Right? Because I may have a preconceived idea about what I think the community is.
Right.
Or we've been doing it this way for 40 years, but things actually, when we really get into doing the work here, it's revealed that things have changed.
Yes.
And so there's going to have to be a change. And that sometimes is very hard.
I know for our church, we're past the 50-year mark now, but I helped with the 40th anniversary.
Oh, yeah.
And I got all the files of all the things that we had done, and I broke it down into decades, created a little brochure and stuff. That was so meaningful to me. It allowed me to see how God has brought in different pastors, and you can see what we've become.
Right.
And it's just like, I was so excited when they were going to do the 50th anniversary and I wasn't going to be in charge. I was like, make sure somebody really gets all the benefit out of this, because it's amazing. And you can see how God has worked through you. And wow. So
you can celebrate that history.
Yes.
And I think in celebrating that, look forward to, what does the future bring?
Right.
That's the key.
And to be open to that.
And be open to that. And that can be tough sometimes.
Oh, yes.
Because we may think of our community in one way, but then, this information reveals something different that we didn't expect.
That's right.
Yeah. But that's exciting too.
Yes.
Because that means new avenues of ministry and, and I think that's the fun part. And I think there are, that's one of the problems that churches often face. They need to make sure that you got an open mind to it, that you're taking your time and going through this, because to do this right, it does take a lot of time. I think that's a pretty important key piece. You can't rush it. And you also need time to digest it.
Oh.
So these numbers and information are going to come in and what do they mean? And let's talk with different people about it and think about it. And so if we do that, I think we're going to beat some of the problems that most churches face when they're with this.
That's right.
They look at it as a hoop to jump through. If we just get this, information, demographics, whatever.
Put it on the shelf.
We're done. We click that. And yet there's such a richness that comes out that the Holy Spirit can reveal to you about ministry, and you don't want to miss that.
That's right.
Because I think churches that are vital, have vitality, that are really growing and having effective ministries are churches that are being paying attention to that.
Yeah.
So that's a key. So all right. So to get into it, right from the very start, I think you need to figure out who your spies are going to be that you're sending into this, promised land.
Yes.
And I know we've been talking a lot about that recently.
Oh, yes.
Our church has gone through some of that and saying, okay, how do we get this task force or ministry team or committee, whatever you want to call it, and who gets a part of it? And I think we've found that it's more successful when you're not worrying about getting a cross-section of people in your congregation to be on the committee.
That's right. You need people with different skill sets.
Yeah.
Yes, and they're different.
I think so.
I know, being the geeky analyst, that I know I interpret things, or I look at numbers differently than other people, and they don't. Yeah. And sometimes it's that, hey, wait a minute. Yes, it said, 20% of the people did this, but did you look at why? Did you understand a little bit more about it? And an analyst knows more about how to look at those numbers. And so you need somebody like that, because not everybody reads them in the same way. Yeah,
so I think if you can find someone like that in your congregation, great.
Yes.
If not, it might be worth even looking outside the congregation and inviting somebody on, maybe going down to your local college or university, and saying, hey, this is what we're doing. You got somebody here that might help us in the process,
That's right.
of understanding what this means. So that would be good, information, somebody who's information technology, experts, planning, organizing, statisticians, data analysis people, people with good leadership skills, can be thinking about it from that way.
That's right.
These are all the types of people you want to be looking. So I think this first task force is really important, selecting the people that will help you to do that.
And also a listener. Because somebody that listens to instead of, if you're in a meeting, other people just going, yeah. Well, actually ask the question too, what are some cons to doing this? Are there some issues with that? And I think that, hearing both sides of it and being open and listening to what the congregation is saying, as well as putting it together with all the study that you're going to do about the community, that all has to come together, and a listener does that.
No, that's good. Again, I dovetail on that and say, look for somebody who's also a team player.
There you go.
Yes. Who can say, all right, I hear that. I can understand that. And here's some other things. And let's throw this all on the table and go, what do we got here? And let's work together to make this puzzle into something. I think that's a key piece to it.
And not just getting hit with all the negatives and go, oh, okay, well, let's just not do that. Because people don't always like to change.
Right. Yeah.
So.
And I think, not worrying about, because you're exactly right. Change is hard for in any situation, right? So, but don't worry about that. Just take it for the information for what it is, and don't try to hide something because you think, well, that will be too much, lay it out there, make sure that everything is, is in the mix.
That's right.
And now, down the line, you may have to deal with change, and that's a different strategy, another video, which we can do. But the important thing is to make sure that you really get the full information. That's the key, because you can't make the right decisions. You can't understand God's vision and what the Holy Spirit is telling you through this, without it. So don't sell it short. Now, talking about short, I was thinking about too the committee. Or the task force, whatever you want to call it. And it's not so much size. We're coming out of a Presbyterian background, and it always seems like, we come up with committees and they always have to have 12 people, right? Following the Lord or something. I'm not sure. But anyway, it's not really the number, I think, that counts. Now, I don't think you need a huge group of people, but what I think really matters is the experience and the expertise of the people that you get on that group for this work here.
Yes, definitely.
That's the key. So you could have a smaller group, 5, 6 people, whatever. Right. I even hate to throw out numbers because, I think it's more, again, what kind of what kind of people can you get together, and can they really mesh as a group?
Right.
Because this can be fun too.
Yes.
It's not all dry. It's exciting, and at least it is for us. So you want to find people who finding data interesting and inspiring.
Right.
So
you got me interested.
That's right. And those are the kind of people that get them on that group, because if somebody you're talking to and you think they might be great and they're going, that doesn't sound all that great, well, then that's probably not the person. They have to find it exciting and interesting. So that's your first step, is getting the right team together and getting those spies, and then you got to get out there and get them out there. Now, there's 2 pieces that I think are important with once you've got your committee, okay, you figured it out, you got however many people, you got everything going there. And then 2 things that has to happen that often gets overlooked. A lot of times we just send that group out and go, okay, start doing it. But you got to do some training.
Yes.
Now, some of these people are already going to have some, so you may have kind of trainers within the group already. But get a focus and say, hey, this is the direction write out as a group, hey, this is the study timeline. That's right. This is what we're going to be doing. Here's the scope of I like the word task force, because I see it as something that, you pull together to accomplish a certain task. Once it's done, you're done. Yeah, they disband. So you've got a task to accomplish. So write out, plan out, get the timeline out of how you're going to do it and what you're going to do. Your goals, your objectives, your final conclusions, make sure you're ready to put those all into place.
That's right. And who's somebody that's good at writing?
Yes. Yeah, that's another person on there. They may not be great at statistics, but they're a good writer.
That's right.
And they can collate information and get it concisely out, because obviously this information is going to get out to the congregation.
Right.
You want to get it out there. So it's not something you're hiding. You want to be as transparent as possible.
That's a very good point.
To get it out there. Yeah. So that's good. You might want to do a little training on how to handle demographic information, make assessment on that, make sure everybody's on the same page with that. I really see that as being a big part that's often forgotten.
Yes, and it is important, because seeing what is in your community, who are the people, what's the age group, you might be pushing for, well, we need young families. Well, you know what? 50% of the people that lived here are 50 and older. Well, that ain't going to happen then for a young family. So you want to make sure that you're looking at your community and how you can serve that community and how they can serve others.
Right. Good. Yeah, no, and you're already making some good connections there. You want to, make those bridges.
Yes.
And you want to be transparent with the congregation as you do that.
That's right. So they understand it and why you're moving forward in that way.
Exactly. So I think after you've done that, you've got them trained and they're set to go, and you got kind of a timeline laid out, and then you get them back, you get them out there, you send them out there, and there are, the first thing is to collect demographic data, and there are a lot of different places to do that. I wrote down a couple of places I've used before. It's called missioninsight.com. There's also preceptgroup.com. They all do. Now, of course, there's a cost to that, but you can get that. They'll get all the demographic you need for your area. But there's a lot of denominational resources.
Right.
So
yes.
Don't hesitate if you're a denominational church to go to your denomination, and a lot of them already have a lot of this stuff for you. So take advantage of it.
They give you ideas about where to get the information, how to write the report, how to do different things, what kind of things that you need to be able to do, so that then when you go to call or look at for the next pastor, he knows what he's coming to. Right. He or she knows who they're coming to, and we, so we can understand each other.
Yeah. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel on that one. There's just so many places to go to get the basic, demographic information. But one thing that I do think you need to do, and that is to do some personal research. I think that really helps. A lot of times when I'm working with a church, and I'm coming to visit their facility and their campus, I'll take a day, I'll come out early and do a 5, 10, 15, 20-mile loop around that church, just to get a feel. And you can begin to see it. You can sense it. I was working with a church not too long ago, and I did that. And it was a church that was in the midst of a changing neighborhood. They had little kind of California bungalows, very well kept and everything, but it was changing over. And what I found was that there were a lot of new young families, moving in. Oh. And as I drove around, I saw a lot of kids, running around the neighborhood and playing outside and stuff. And so I was like, oh, okay, I'm getting a feel that, this is really actually a little bit of a younger neighborhood.
And actually driving around and observing that is not a bad idea, even if you live in the community. Yeah. To just look around and say, oh, hey, now you have a new perspective when you're driving, not just going to the grocery store.
Right.
So.
Yeah. You're specific. No, you're right. Deborah, you got to do
love
that
the idea.
and look at that with fresh eyes, that you might have missed something just because you're, like you said, you're focused on wherever you're going every day.
That's right.
And you're in this trance, driving along,
Yeah.
So I think that's important, to get out there and do a little of your own research. And it doesn't hurt to stop in at the local library and talk to people. Look at churches. What other churches are in the community? What are they doing? What do their campuses look like? What kind of ministries do they have? That you can do your own research. And a lot of times you can stop down to the city planning office, and just sit down and get some time with the city planner and go, hey, what's going on?
I didn't know
what's
that.
coming down the line. Sure. A lot of these guys love to talk with you about that. Rarely have they had somebody come in ever ask them about their own job, and they get excited about it, and they can tell you where new developments are going in, what the planning is for highways and roadways and all that, that it can all be a part of your assessment of your community. The second thing is really a big piece that now spreads out. We're kind of taking this apart, to give you these sections, but they don't always nicely, separate. You're kind of doing this all together, okay? But I want to pull this out so that you can kind of understand some of the focus that you might want to have while you're doing a specific thing. Okay, and so target area is the next thing. You've done some demographics, but even while you're doing demographics, you got to kind of figure out through the process what is going to be your target community. All right, and that can be a number of things. All right, so this is going to be something that you as a group, and maybe even with your counselor session, consistory, whatever your leadership team is called, you might have to sit down with them and talk about, because there are some churches who they really are. I mean, we all see community in that name, in the name of a church, but they really are a community or neighborhood church, and they really see that that's the parameters of their ministry. They're going to focus on their neighborhood or their city limit or whatever. And I'm not talking about good or bad here, but I am talking about specifics. I remember somebody once asked Dr. Robert Schuller, is there any place you can't start a church? And he said, yeah, where there's no people, So it can be anything, there. But it could be like your city or town limit. It could be, you could become a regional church. So you're talking about maybe more than one city or town, or even a county limit. You're looking at that, You can even go to state, what I call a state, target area, it could be, we might say, well, our focus is going to be, Southern California, San Diego County, which is huge, or Southern California, or even the state of California, some ministries. Now, if you choose those things, of course, that's going to determine a lot of other things, right? It's going to determine what you're doing in mission, how you're going to focus, how you're going to staff, where your finances are going, because you'd have to hit this big area, So, but that needs to be defined. And there are even interstate churches that go into either larger, across states, and then of course you have national churches that minister and speak to a national audience, and then international.
Wow.
You got churches with international, yeah. So all of those, you could be in. So all the way from that small, community church, all the way to international churches, and understanding what your demographic is going to be, that boundary. Plays a lot in how you're going to set up the rest of how you're going to organize your church, how you're going to develop, how you're going to finance, what the focus is going to be.
Yes.
So it takes some time to sit down and be talking about that. And the more demographic information that comes in, the more you have the opportunity to do that. So it's kind of key. All right, then the next thing is to figure out the unchurched information. All right, because you got to know what your field is for harvest.
That's right.
I'm assuming that, now that's my assumption, okay, but I'm assuming that most churches are not going after the churched. right? We're trying to reach people who are not in church. Now,
That's right.
that may be Christians who've moved into a community who are looking for a church home because they just moved in. They don't have, any place. Right. It could be Christians who have fallen away from the church, not been active in church. And you can say, well, we're going to grab those folks and so forth. And obviously people who, never made a decision for Christ, wouldn't consider themselves Christians, but reaching them.
Yes. Yes.
So you want to know that demographic. How many people are out there, right? And there are certain things that you can do to be able to have that happen. So you kind of figure out those boundaries and what are in it. Now it changes obviously as you get larger and larger, right? That's a whole different ball game in those. But I want to concentrate a little bit on anyone that's more from a community to maybe a kind of a regional church, okay? Mm-hmm. And you got to find out, well, first of all, how many churches are in our community?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then call them up or stop in and talk to them. That's even better if you can take the time to stop in and talk with them, and find out what kind of ministry do they have and how many are they worshiping. Now there's a difference. Don't ask, what's on the church rolls. Don't let them give you that number because that's always higher.
Yes, a lot higher. And some of those people only show up at Christmas and Easter.
Yeah, and that doesn't give you a real true reflection. But find out what are they average worshiping on a Sunday, right. And if they'll tell you. Some churches get all, I don't know, they want to hide that information for some reason or whatever. But we're all in the same, ball game here. I'm happy to have churches in my community and they're reaching people for Christ, That's
right.
what it's all about,
Hey.
And I'll try to figure out where's my niche, they're doing that, great, and they're doing it well. Well, then praise God, and now I'm going to go see what's not being met, what needs.
That's right, because they can't do everything. So, we each have our part that we play.
Yeah, so we're not in competition, we're trying to work together.
That's right.
But we need a clear picture of how many people in our region or our target area are unchurched. And so find out what's the average worship of these churches. I've got X amount of number of churches in my community. They're worshiping this amount. And, what has the demographics told me about my population, my census, and take that, what's being in worship every Sunday, and take that out of that number of the census population. Right. And then that gives you basically your unchurched population.
Well, it's also interesting, and I know I might be jumping ahead here, but good. Just the fact that as new people come to your church, kind of find out what attracted them. Yep. Was it one of our ministries? Was it, hey, they're just checking it out for this week? Or, I don't know. It's been really interesting because we started doing this a few years ago, was really trying to kind of jump on them when they came without chasing them away, but just what attracted them. And it was very, very interesting responses and very exciting to see, hey, they came because this, wow, we made a difference. And then you can see how they get involved in our church. And
you also see trends. The more that you keep that information, which is really important. I'm glad you brought that up, Deborah. You keep that information because then you begin to see these trends.
Yes.
And you go, oh, wow. And then you can start focusing the ministry into those.
Yes.
Because that's what keeps coming up. People are looking for this. And, all right, great. That's a strength. Then let's really work on it and make it happen.
Actually, one thing I'm going to tie into is that we had a class that we started doing a couple years ago. And I know everybody has these new member classes kind of thing, but it was so interesting that I got to be part of it with John as we're doing this. And it was so fun to talk to these people, and then they get to know us. We get to know them. And then, they become, as you see them every week, it's like, hi, how you doing? And I'm so glad I got to know you. And it really then connects them to you. And it's like, this is great. Yeah. So really
See, you're coming up with another video we're going to have to do, how to take that unchurched person, and bring them all the way to the point of being involved, and tied into your congregation.
That's right.
And that's intentional.
Yes.
It doesn't happen by accident.
You got to be careful not to jump on them too much, but also just to kind of slowly integrate them. And it has been such a difference, I think, with my connection to these people, and I love getting to do that class. So they learned about spiritual gifts, and also they could learn about some of the ministries that you have. And so kind of, is this something that you need to have at your church? Well, maybe it doesn't work at your church. That's okay. But I know it worked for ours, and it was very exciting.
And you got to find what works.
That's right. The key. Yeah. Each class, I mean, a new members class at each church is going to be different. But I loved this one that we did. And so anyway.
Right. No, I think that's important. And kind of following along on that, getting the congregation involved. And unless you're starting the church and there is no congregation yet,
that's true.
You'll have a group of people. And so also part of this process is also understanding your own people, right? And what you have. And so I think the next thing that I want to bring up is what I call a visitation survey, right? So you want to visit, all of your church families, and sit down with them and talk with them. What are they thinking? What do they see? How did they learn about the church? Where do they see the church going? Grab that information too. And like you mentioned, I call them first timers, the people that have come for the first time into your congregation. Make sure you're tracking that information. You need that, to have as one of the pieces. And a lot of churches have preschool. Our church has a preschool families.
Actually, that's how I got here.
Okay, so you came in that way.
I came in that way, and I was not going to church. I had grown up in the church, but then I had gotten away from the church. But then we brought our kid here, and there were some church families that their kids were in the preschool. They started talking and telling me different things, and pretty soon I was hooked.
Right. Yeah, no, that's good, and I think that's important. And building that bridge. Yes. And getting vital information from them. A lot of churches have preschools, but they're not using it as a bridge to reach people. It's just kind of a sidelight. And I think it really has to be there to be an effective ministry to continue to reach out and be in touch. Right. So that's another thing. And then another thing I do when I get on site with a church, I'll go to a restaurant and talk with the waitress or waiter, and say, hey, that church down the road, you know anything about that? Just to hear if they say something, and it'll be interesting. Some of them, nope, never, I don't know anything about them. Okay, that tells you something. Talk to the unchurched, the prospects, and hear what they're saying, and it doesn't even hurt to do a survey. Now, I kind of shy away from the old days. We used to go door to door and do those surveys. You'd have to ask a couple, and that has kind of a negative connotation nowadays. So you have to figure out different ways of doing it. And that's one of the things I do. I just go to the community, the hardware store. You stop in. Hey, how you doing? Hey, I'm doing some work for that church down the way. Have you ever heard of it? Have you anything like that? And just hear what they have to say. Yeah. Yes. And if there's a lot of people generally around your church that have never heard about it, that might be important information to feed back to go. Oh, we're going to have to really get a mailing out there, or I'm going to have to start visiting these people.
Right.
Whatever the case might
be. What can we do to attract them? I mean, they're nearby, but they don't seem to know anything about us.
Yeah. So that would be a key piece to this process. Right. And then the next one is, going on church data. Like you mentioned, you were there for the 40-year anniversary, 50-year anniversary. And to look back, what has the church history been from start to present? Understanding where we've been, the ups and downs, and all of the things that you can pull out of that. So that's important to gather, so we know who we are and where we've been, and some of the good, positive things that have happened, and some of the challenging things, because that tells us a lot about ourselves.
That's true.
So I think that's important.
What have we worked through?
Right. And talking about, doing an observation on our different ministries or committees that we have. What ministries, committees does the church already have functioning? How are they doing? What are our member expectations? What style of worship do we have? What type of music do we, use? That kind of thing.
That's true.
All important.
Well, I just know that we used to have adult discipleship pastors here, and through time. And then it kind of went by the wayside, and the classes were, kind of there. And then John came, and oh my gosh, he's lit it on fire. I mean, we have people coming to classes.
I'm sure glad I have you in this video.
We have a variety of people that are involved in teaching, and just different ways that people are connecting and learning more about God. And people are walking away like, wow, I didn't know that before. And so there are just so many ways that you can bring people in. But just to see that history of, hey, it made a difference when...
Tell you what you're doing already.
That's right.
Education, that's one. Mission, what are you doing in mission?
That's right.
What's your thought on that? Fellowship, what do you guys do for fellowship as a church, as a whole church, what kind of things are happening? And then, of course, your website and your social media. And we could probably do a whole video on that too, right? I mean, working with that, very, very important to understand, how are we on, what's our presence online? What are these things that people see for the very first time in their contact with us? That's key. And then I would go to leadership and administration, your pastors, your ministers, any leadership staff you have, directors, who are they, what gifts do they have? Really come to understand yourself. You're trying to get a hold on the church, volunteer staff, all those. What are they doing? How many do we have? What areas of, what are our strengths there? We're thankful in our church that we have people that are in leadership staff that are great. They're really, solid, good, gifted people. What a wonderful team we've got. And what a blessing that is, to have. And then, of course, your elders and deacons, depending upon how your church is made up,
Right.
But, that kind of staff, what's the commitment they have and the gifts they have. And, of course, looking at your active participants and your passive participants, knowing, how many do we really have that are real active and how many are just kind of sitting on the sidelines. That's important. And then, of course, your whole campus and facilities. What do we have here, available to us? And I think one key piece in this is to remember that, and it's forgotten and it's hard because we sometimes identify, our sanctuary or something with the Lord's house, and we don't want to change or do anything, besides that. But really, I see most of all in the vitality of churches that are really moving ahead is they look at the campus and facilities as tools in ministry, of reaching out to the community and being a part of the community. And I remember I worked with a small church who it had a pretty good sized campus, but its facilities were small. It had a smaller sanctuary, I think. Maybe at tops, they could hit 100 people, packing it in. And they had pews, and so it was really just set up for one way of worship or communication, And we did a study, and the community needed, more kind of social places, it didn't have anything to do with, bring kids.
Good point.
And so they made a good decision. They said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to move out our pews and put chairs in. You get these chairs, and then we can clear out our sanctuary, and it can be just used, that way, or we can do it in a round, or we can do all kinds. And it just opened up what they could do,
I'm thinking of, having a dinner that, everybody can come to, right, and exchange ideas.
So all of a sudden, that room, which was their biggest room, which was only being used maybe 10% of the time, all of a sudden, boom, it just opened up, and boom, they had their connection to the community, and it just took that.
And I see people talking, and as soon as you describe that, it's like, oh wow, I can see all the things you could do with that. How exciting!
And it was a change. I mean, they had to work through the whole loss of pews. Some people were pretty connected to them.
I bet.
But what was kind of cool, side story to this, was that there was a church that had got in their another town over, but pretty close to their community, who their church became got a National Historic Spot registry, and they had an upper balcony that they had redone. It kind of gone into disrepair, but they were able to redo it and everything. But they didn't have any pews. And so we ended up being able to donate the pew. You know, that church was able to donate those pews to that, to that church.
Oh.
So it was a ministry. You know,
Yes.
it was great. And then getting these chairs. The church purchased these chairs, and we had to ship them up. I don't know, they were from Georgia or something, and they had to ship them up. And there was. Somebody had a connection with a trucking company and ended up, that they were going to bring up a half load, and they said, well, we'll just throw those chairs in, for the second half of that load for free.
Gosh.
And so they got their chairs shipped up there. So you talk about the Holy Spirit,
Really?
working in that whole thing. It was, and then also opening up, that facility for their community. So it worked out really well.
Amazing.
Yeah.
God is at work.
That's right. And then, of course, the next thing is your stewardship resources. You need to know, what do we have as resources for stewardship, and sometimes it's tough going, and you got to pray about that and trust God to provide, Right. And other times there are churches that have this rainy day fund sitting over here, and maybe you got to realize it's raining or something,
That's right. When to take that.
Yeah,
and when not to take it.
Right, exactly. And so that all has to be figured out, and working on it. And then, you also have to be aware of your denomination-affiliated church. What are the denominational influences? Because sometimes that may play into what you can and can't do, and how you're going to reach your community, and how you're going to evaluate this this target group.
That's true. Yeah.
So, and then of course, finally, I wrote down a congregational perception of the current ministry you have right now, understanding how the congregation perceives us now at this moment. Are we healthy, missional? Do they think that? Or do they see us as a stable community, or do they see us more at a critical moment? This is the critical moment, or is this at risk? And we've got a whole study we could do on determining that, helping the congregation determine those things.
Right.
So that could also be a part of this self-study that you're doing.
You're right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, because really understanding where you are at, are there some specific things that you need to do so you don't collapse? I mean, you want to keep going, and so maybe you need to realize that position.
This is the things we have to do to get back to be missional and healthy.
That's right.
Yeah. And so that can come out of this too. So that all of those things are a part of this self-study. So there's a lot there, to do. And it's going to take a while. You're not just going to go into a room and,
and walk out with the final report.
Or send in for some, demographics and expect to come back and we're all done, That's right. No, these things have to be talked about. And then finally, I think the last piece of the puzzle is what I call the SPIES report, and they come back and give a written report of everything that they found and put it into a whole process. And what I would do is really have a congregational dinner, and invite people, have dinner together, and then report on that and give a report. That's
a good idea. So the whole congregation understands it, because they've been helping to contribute the data and the information, but they need to know what's in the final result.
And that's going to be determined then, of course, all of this stuff we're going to pull out to say this is the vision, and you're going to write this down. And it makes more sense to the congregation when they've seen it to say, oh, this is the vision we're coming up with.
Instead of, where did they get that?
Which often happens.
Oh, yes. But at least then they see the background of where you're headed now, and to be able to write the vision and mission statements.
So that's the key. Now, that's very fast. We went through this. There's a lot of stuff. If you got any questions, or you want to get into more, or you want some help even doing your church vitality stuff, whatever, make sure you contact me. We'll be happy to help you out, talk with you, or work with your church, or whatever we can do to help you out. But hopefully it's been helpful in giving you some kind of overall perspective on it.
That's right. And why you want to do it. And that, yes, it's not easy, but all these things you'll be celebrating at the end of your study, because you'll see who you are, and you'll be able to take that time to reflect on what God wants your church to be, what is your special thing you're going to do in your community? And that's exciting. So look forward to it.
That's right. And that's how we'll end, in that excitement. And the next video is, writing the vision statement. What is a vision statement? What is it comparable to like a mission statement? How do you pull all the information we just talked about and get it down into a mission or vision statement? So we'll be doing that in this next video, and we invite you to watch, and we'll see you then.